In a second-hand set of dimensions, on an astral plane that was never meant to fly, through wavering star mists, see the Grey Satuin. Drifting onwards through space, atop the shell of the Worlde's turtle, are 4 giant elephants, upon whose broad shoulders rests the Discworld. Welcome to Dining Table Discworld. We're reading through the Discworld novels and discussing them at our dining table. Be aware there will be spoilers for the current book and others in the series.
Hello, welcome to Dining Table Discworld. I'm Dave.
I'm Kathy.
And today we are talking about Moving Pictures, which is the 10th of the Discworld novels, and it was published in 1990. So Kathy, what is the synopsis?
A priest dies in a ramshackle hut near a lonely coastal hill. Some alchemists in Ankh-Morpork discover a way to make moving pictures using tiny imps and flammable cellulose, and suddenly Hollywood magic is loose on the disc. Wizarding student Victor sees an early click in the street and journeys to the newly erected settlement of Hollywood without really knowing why. He breaks into moving pictures and meets Ginger, who wants fame and has a bad habit of sleepwalking. He also meets Gatsbo the Wonder Dog, a small grey mutt who can talk. Meanwhile, Hollywood draws all sorts, including the ruthless merchant Dibbler, his troll-heavy detritus, and various talking animals to a ramshackle community drawn by a dream and built on creating things for show. After some setbacks, Victor and Ginger become massive stars in Ankh-Morpork. But Hollywood attracts attention from creatures outside reality, who want nothing more than to break out of moving pictures. Be prepared for the thrilling climax with wizards, dogs, boding fogs, and orangutan in distress, plus 1,000 elephants.
1,000 elephants. 1,000 elephants.
It didn't really do much.
No, there was a lot of hype and little less.
It's a book with various kind of lines running through it.
Yes.
And some of those seem to work better than others, but I suppose we'll get to that.
Anyway, so what was your initial thoughts on it?
So this is one of the novels that I think I only read once. Because again, much like with Guards, I'd read stuff later featuring some of these characters. And so going back, I was like, oh, this is where they started. But kind of knowing where they already were, I think at the time, as a teenager, I wasn't quite as keen on going back. I suspect I didn't get as many of the references also. Reading it now, actually, I liked it much more than I expected to. It was one I couldn't really remember very well, other than seeing pictures of it, like the giant lady holding an orangutan. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and there was more to it, I think, more that I got.
Yeah.
And of the ones I sort of think of as early standalone, I definitely liked it more than Pyramids.
Yes, this is head and shoulders above Pyramids. For a start, we actually see some of these characters later on in the series. In fact, they use some characters we already know, which helps. So yes, I enjoyed it as well. Yes, I think I got more of the film references just because I've seen more films now and seen more tropes within that. So yeah. And yes, it's as a standalone. Well, it's not really standalone. It's kind of tangential to another, a number of.
I hadn't realised this is where this brand of the wizard started.
Yeah.
I think I'd sort of thought it was a Rincewind book, but it's not.
Let's start with the wizards, as you've mentioned them.
So their overall plot line, I think Pratchett knew he needed them at the end, and he obviously introduced new and, for once, continuing Arts Chancellor Muster and Ridcully, which was fine. It's like, oh, it's these guys, we're getting this crew together. But then most of the wizard plot line is just, every so often we cut to the university and thing goes blip, 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 blip.
Yes.
And it's kind of, that's it. So it felt like the intro at the beginning, and then kind of from when they decide to sneak out and go to the cinema and all the stuff then is interesting. In between, it's just like, we're going to mention these guys every so often because they're going to be here later.
It's the backdoor pilot for the new version of the Unseen University.
There is that, yes.
I mean, to put it into TV and film pilot, they are there, and these brand of wizards we will see now going through the whole series. And I've got to say, I do like these wizards. These are the bumbling. You've got the older ones. You've got Ridcully, who is not even entirely sure why he's there. Would much rather go fishing.
Or hunting.
Obviously, must be a very powerful wizard.
Yeah, I mean, it is where they go from... Because previous wizard stuff is kind of either... You've got the very hierarchical, powerful wizard guys, but all backstabbing and that sort of thing. Or you've got whatever that guy that Granny Weatherwax met was, which sort of seemed a little bit more like this, but not there. But I think with Side Equal Rights was a bit of a beta test for a few things.
Yeah.
This, you've just got a load of old duffers, really, that are running a university.
And Ponder Stibbons.
Ponder Stibbons appears, yes.
Who is the first his first real student you actually get to meet, other than about Victor.
Yeah.
So
I felt like Victor dropped out at some point and went off to make movies.
I don't think he technically dropped out.
Well, he just left.
He just left. Yes. Anyway, so yes, I kind of got a soft spot for these wizards because these are closer to what we expect from the later.
Yeah, it feels like Pratchett perhaps. I mean, sorcery obviously kind of upended everything, but there hadn't been much continuity prior to that.
No, yeah.
Yeah, and then this kind of gets it settled, and he's obviously like, this is the mode I want it to be in. So that's fair enough. So Master and Red Cully, it seems that after all the problems they'd had of late, although timelines are a bit of a confusing thing, the wizards decided to make as Chancellor some old fella from the country.
Yeah, who hadn't been involved in anything that went before.
What I feel like they make clear at some point is that all the wizards during the events of sorcery had somehow been visiting their aunts in the countryside.
Well,
so there was that, but Rico seems like he wasn't involved, and then they've called him to be our Chancellor, and he's turned up, and instead of this kind of doddering old mild-mannered chap they can just push around, he's actually this sort of incredibly bloody-minded. He seems quite posh, but probably he's all into hunting and stuff. But he's very down. It's kind of so posh he's not actually fancy.
Yeah.
So he's very down to earth, and he's a bit wants exercise, and he gets a bit annoyed by the people. He's not a people person, but he'll just kind of override everyone.
Yeah, just rush on over them.
Yes.
The bursar coming in with his partners of papers, going, "Please sign this." Is like, no, I am off to do this instead.
Yes, I have heard. I think it was again Mark Ashiro from Mark Rees pictures him as Ron Swanson.
I can see that. That is a reasonable. But this is the man that gets the university back in order, and we actually see some continuity through this.
So we have the bursar who at this point is just trying to handle Rid Cully, but isn't very well. He's just turning up to do paperwork and number stuff, and Rid Cully's not at all bothered and just ignores him. Is this isn't the same bursar from the previous?
I don't
from sorcery,
think so. No,
because there's a guy in that who's a bursar, but he has a name and seems to be a different dude.
No, I think this is a different bursar.
Probably got destroyed in an exploding tower, which I think happened to a lot of the old wizards, so I don't have to remember any of them again. Probably. And it's obviously before the bursar starts to have whatever very severe mental health problems he's having, although I think he started here. And then you've got various wizards who are just like the faculty in my head, because I know that there's the dean and there's the chair and there's the lecturer, and they're all, to my mind, just a sort of collection of slightly unpleasant old men with beards.
Yeah, the reader of recent runes who's in there. That is certainly one of them, eventually.
There's bits where they're all having conversations. I know one of them's quite fat and one of them's a bit haughty, but I don't remember which one's which. It's just the wizards are having conversation now, and they're all just in my head a very similar bearded old boomer types, frankly. So that's where I've got to. And obviously you've got Windle Poons, who's in his wheelchair.
Yes.
And is the kind of oldest and kind of half deaf, but still very lively. And it's I get that they'll do more stuff later, but in this it's kind of they're introduced. Then there's some very meaningless bits that are just there's a sense of foreboding, but the wizards are ignoring it. It's okay, with the weird little elephant pot that makes a noise when reality has gone weird.
Based on a real thing.
Is it?
Yeah, it's based on the thing that detected earthquakes in China.
Oh, okay, that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that was it. It's definitely a real thing where it and I'm pretty certain it was earthquakes. And it would move and balls would drop based on weather.
There may have been a Richter joke that I missed then completely, but yes, because some guy invented devices for measuring everything. But yes, the point is the wizards just ignoring it. And then there's a bit where they sneak out, and frankly, they're just kind of horrible old men. Then I'm a bit I kind of see this type, but they're the kind of blokes you're I'm just going to avoid these gents in the pub, So it's kind of funny, but in a sort of ugh sort of way. Yeah. So, as I say, the plot line most just seems to introduce them, then not really have them do much, and just kind of, the wizard's here now, it's I want to read the other stuff. And then at the end, they become useful because I guess they just kind of follow the event, their action, because they're mostly transporting the camera guy around, frankly, and then...
I'm right. Just it's an early seismoscope invented by Chinese philosopher Zhang Heng in AD 132. There's a large urn on the outside of which are 8 dragon heads facing the eight principal directions of the compass. And yes, when it detects a
Earthquake.
It would a ball would drop from the dragon's mouth.
Okay. Can we get onto the meat of the book?
We can, yes. So, because wizards lead into the main character.
Yes. So the main character is Victor, who is described as being, working very hard at his laziness. Victor's in a situation where his uncle, Oswald, Osbert, Osric, they're all mentioned. Everyone's got an uncle called something like that.
Oswald
has said that he has to study as a wizard. Basically, his uncle left him an inheritance that only pays out if
he's studying.
And also, but it doesn't pay out if he gets a failing grade. And the grading system of the Unseen University seems to be 80 is a pass and 88 means you graduate. As a person who has seen many a grading system, I'm very bemused by, but okay.
I knew we were at one point going to pick holes in the grading system of the Unseen University.
It's just very weird, that's all I'm saying. Like, there's not even like what's a 2-1 and what's a 2-2. There's just like 8 points between fail and you can stop studying now, as far as I can see. Anyway, so Victor works very hard to always get within that 8 points, and he's basically been a student for a very long time, and the faculty is starting to notice. But the whole point is that Victor's kind of puts a lot of effort into his laziness. He wants to stay a student, so he's puts a lot of effort into knowing everything, like so that he knows so much he can actually control how well he does on the test. So so he's pretty smart, but he's not very motivated. And there's stuff like, he stays in shape because he doesn't want to move extra weight around, which isn't really how that works, but fine. Yeah. And there's other stuff like that. But yes, Victor's in the street, and then he sees a click, which is named after the click, 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 click noise that the projector makes.
Yes.
And then suddenly he, in a kind of fugue state, ends up in Holywood, which seems to be, it's quite some miles out of Ankh-Morpork. Like it's like a cart ride away.
I mean, we have to point out at this point, Victor is Errol Flynn. That is he's got the thin moustache. While he's in Holy, he takes on all these kind of swashbuckling
leading man roles.
Yeah, he is Errol Flynn.
Whereas the main female character in this is Ginger, and she is various screen ladies.
Marilyn Monroe.
Well, that's more the giant one. Well, no, it's Garbo. They think she says, "I want to be alone" when she's kind of I want to be alone.
Yeah,
and that's a classic Garbo line. And there's also the fact that she has quite a connection to the place. So when Victor turns up, he doesn't understand. It's a very weird place. There's always the sound of hammering and building, because the whole thing is that they use cellulose, which is highly flammable and explosive.
Octocellulose.
The cameras are just little imps inside that are drawing, so it's kind of like the iconograph from Colour of Magic, but then they've realised if they run all the pictures together it makes a moving picture, and it's interesting because they mostly say moving picture throughout, but there are occasional bits where like Victor will say movie, and I'm like, okay, but they never figure out sound, although they do figure out colour. And also the camera, it's not a camera, is it? Do they call it a camera? Because there's a guy called Gaffer, which is what's funny, and he moves the handle around, which is recording. But what that does is it just whips the little imps to make them paint. Yes. So it's kind of quite unpleasant.
Oh, yeah, but they're union rules, so they.
There's lots about unions, yes. They're filming stuff, and at first, so the people who come up with this is the alchemists, so the Alchemist Guild of Ankh-Morpork, who usually try to turn like lead into gold or various things into gold and blow stuff up a lot. And they've discovered this thing, so they go out to this place. It's by the sea, it's very flat apart from this one hill, and basically this tiny town goes up. And there's just the sound of hammering and construction constantly as people are building kind of ramshackle places to live, but they're also building sets. And there's a bit early on where it says that Victor described it later as like, you had to look at the houses, everything was just a facade, a facsimile.
Yeah.
So Victor turns up, and it's sort of at the point where the alchemist is still trying to make things educational.
Yeah, we go from, we have the initial, it's all got to be education, it's all got to be for the, expanding people's mind, until Cut My Own Throat Dibbler arrives. Because all the people coming to Holywood are being drawn there by these whispers and this idea that is coming from the hill, and it takes over them some more than others. And Cut My Own Throat Dibbler has been infected, one of the most, and
by Holywood magic, I think.
Yes, and he is there. He is the businessman. He is coming in to he sees dollar signs. He sees
he does Singing in the Rain just as he leaves Ankh-Morpork.
Yes.
Because Cole and Nobby see him because they're like the police officer and Singing in the Rain.
So he comes in, and he basically bamboozles this alchemist.
Well, doesn't it go from it's untied alchemists to Century of the Fruit Bats?
Yes.
Which obviously the production has. I mean, so much of this is just references to stuff that we probably missed so many of them.
Yeah, and he's there, and so Dibbler comes in, and Dibbler we've seen a couple of times before, usually selling sausages in a barn. Loosely described as sausage in a bun.
But he'll also sell royal memorabilia and whatever's used at the time.
But basically whatever he can get a hold of cheap and sell.
He comes in as the ruthless big business studio.
Yes,
interest.
exactly.
So he's like the Warner Brothers, I guess, or any of those other guys whose names I don't recall. Because the Warner Brothers is the name of the studio still.
And with it, he kind of acts like a bit of a channel for these ideas.
So his films were very dramatic, and he makes them longer. So I was talking about Ginger. Ginger's been in a lot of films when she meets Victor, and they don't really get on at first, and then they look good together on screen. Ginger will do this thing about, I did like 2 clicks this morning, another click later, which is interesting. The idea you can do them so quickly, which is like a different kind of film industry now.
Yes.
Which I don't know if that's what Pratchett was trying to reference, but the idea of I've done like this many films in the morning, this many films in a week is more adult nowadays. So I think the idea is that the clicks are very
they're very short. So
yeah, Victor meets Gaspode, and Victor, having had training as a wizard, I think realizes a bit quicker that Gaspode's talking. Gaspode's a talking dog, and you don't actually see him wake up to the Hollywood magic, but presumably that's what affected him. Because when I first tried, I was like, was Gaspode already talking then? But it's just that he's one of the early Hollywood people, and he kind of guides Victor. He's sort of Gaspode's really on the ball. And he calls himself Gaspode the Wonder Dog, and he was obviously used as street entertainment, and then he, I guess, woke up, came to Hollywood. But he's really on the ball. He actually helps Victor, who's a bit naive at first. He helps other characters a bit naive. There are a few other talking animals as well.
Yes,
there's like a cat, a mouse, a rabbit, and a duck.
I wonder where we got those from.
Yes, yes. Well, the cat and the mouse have this weird idea of chasing each other, but also using frying pans.
Yes.
The rabbit's quite ill-tempered. The duck just says quack. I think we'll mention the duck later, maybe. But yes, and Victor kind of meets these, because most people don't quite realise Gaspode's talking. They hear a voice from kind of quite low down. They're looking around. And then but if anyone talks to him, he'll just say, woof. But he'll say it.
Yeah, because he'll say woof.
Which becomes a running theme of Gaspode, because he's, again, a character in...
Bark.
Or bark, yes. Yes, but Gaspode's got this thing, it's like, I'm independent, I'm my own dog. And Victor's never his owner, although people are always like, that's your dog. Gaspode's obviously incredibly mangy and, like, flea-bitten, and, like, he's a street dog.
Yeah.
But with a heart of gold, I guess.
Yes.
And he's always a bit like, I don't need humans, I don't... But then sometimes he'll still try to... Deep down, I think he kind of wants to save the day, but he's cynical because everyone always, like... He's the kind of dog you'll kick in the street. But, he's got the town sorted out. So, yeah, him and Ginger are kind of like the experienced people, and Victor comes in and gets experience. I feel like... Moving pictures, in my head, is kind of similar to Pyramids and Mort, in that you've got a story about this guy, and then there's also a girl, and she is important, but it's not really about her. She has her own stuff, but she's not centred. And I think that's why in my head I sort of thought of this like Pyramids and Mort, because Ginger is very important to the plot, but we don't get to see her viewpoint very much.
No.
Which is similar to Tracy, which is similar to Isabel. They're still kind of characters who are there. They're more than one note.
Yeah.
Pratchett is good at writing women. But because I know he's good at writing women, I feel like he's not given these as much rounding out as he could have done.
No.
And certainly they don't have the same level of detail in the narrative or in the viewpoint as the male character does.
No.
So that's why I think these three are in my head as being, that's a similar theme that... Now I'm saying it, I sort of like just had them in my head as that, and so now we're talking about things so much, I suddenly thought, it's like that.
I mean, in some respects, Gaspode possibly gets a bit more.
Oh no, it's absolutely more Victor and Gaspode than it is Victor and Ginger.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's only at the very end that they seem to be a pair and Gaspode separate, but that's because they're literally separated. But no, I mean, Victor's talking to Gaspode more and following his advice more and going around with him more, really.
Yeah.
So that's just how that is.
A little bit mirroring, though, the kind of films of the time, though, where, you've got your leading man and the women can be a little interchangeable, I
suppose it depends which films. But
it's
a bit. I mean, Somebody else who turns up with Dibbler is also Detritus.
Yes.
And I feel like Detritus has been mentioned before, but didn't do much.
Yes, he was the bouncer in Guards.
Yes.
On the Mended Drum.
Yeah, I think... See, in my head, I always thought dwarf culture was more filled in than troll culture. Again, just because of the order of the books I read, I think. Yeah. But actually, there's a lot of stuff about troll stuff here, because Detritus' whole thing is quite dim, and it's not till later book we discover how that works. But he's dim and he's big, so he's the muscle. And he just does what Mr. Dibbler says. But then he starts to fall for Ruby, who is also a troll, who basically performs at the troll bar. And it's got this very kind of like the lady in the noir film singing the sad song at the bar.
With the feather boa and the...
Yes, because she has a feather boa and stuff. And that's what's interesting, because the thing with Hollywood is it's incredibly equal. There's humans, there's dwarves, there's trolls. A couple of the trolls they meet, they want to change their names, so one of them gets called...
Rocky and Mort. But Monty.
Yeah.
Rocky and Monty.
Is it Monty?
Oh, no, it's Rock and Monty.
It's definitely Rock, because it's like Rock Hudson.
I'm pretty certain it's Monty.
So there's the place where everyone goes to eat, which I forgot the name of, where they serve terrible food, but everyone's so busy from filming, because it's not just the actors, it's also, the props, the costumes, the cameras, the set builders.
Maury,
yes, thank you. I'm sure that's a reference to somebody else too, and I can't think who. And everyone just eats together, and everyone's all in the business of show. So no one's really too bothered about who's a troll and who's a dwarf. There is one point where trolls and dwarfs are kind of... Because in a lot of it, the trolls are just the monsters who are attacking people. So they're always the bad guys. And sometimes they're like, they'll paint Maury green and put some stuff on him, then he's supposed to be a different kind of monster. But then after a while, they get a little bit annoyed. Like, I don't think they say typecast, but it's that kind of thing. But the point is, everyone has kind of a place, and it's like, we're all just doing this together. And that's where we had the interesting thing where it did say the word elf.
Yes. So we get a overview of the people that they're talking about, all these different races in there, and yes, they do say, and a couple of elves, which we will learn later on should be quite terrifying.
So I think at this point, Pratchett had decided he was going to use various, I guess, magical races. I feel like species is a better word. But yeah.
I mean, he'd already got trolls, dwarves.
I mean, the little imps are kind of in the cameras. They're kind of they're almost machinery. It's a bit like in the Flintstones.
Demonic stuff. I mean, he's plumbing from the classics.
Yeah, it's kind of like Tolkien-esque stuff. And I suppose he's not mentioned elves yet, so he's just like, oh, elves. My headcanon is that they're people who may have been around at previous actual elf incursions and have come away looking a little bit elfy, which again I think comes up.
We'll get to in Lords and Ladies. Why that would have been.
Well, it's also mentioned soul music a little bit as well, which is the other thing. Which is, again, also a companion piece of this, because, while this is like Hollywood, that's rock music. But obviously that's part of the Death series more, whereas, again, this is why this one... It's kind of standalone in that the main characters don't follow on, but you're right, it's the start of the specific faculty of wizards, it's the start of Gaspode. It really fleshes out Dibbler, who'd only really been in one book before.
I know we've seen loads of the guards and Ankh-Morpork based books.
And also the patricians in it a bit.
Yeah.
He doesn't quite feel correct to me. So at the beginning, the thing that starts it is the Alchemist Guild showing a screening because somebody's figured out how to do this and they show it, but we don't see that. What we see is somebody who was spying because they work at the Alchemist Guild, but not as an alchemist. I think they're a servant or something, reporting to Vetinari or somebody, so that it's kind of one of the many spies Vetinari has everywhere. And so that's interesting. But then later, towards the end, when Vetinari shows up, he seems very dismissive, like he's this old guy. Oh, what's the fuss of this newfangled thing? Like, oh, he's only interested in people, not in how things are. And it feels to me like, is this where Vetinari learns he has to be interested in these weird fads the city goes through? He's told he has to meet Victor and Ginger, but he doesn't. He's like, who are these young people?
I'm wondering whether he, in some respects, the Hollywood magic, because at this point towards the end of the book, it is the biggest. It's like a 3-reeler, 4-reeler. It was the biggest.
I think it was 7-reeler.
We'll biggest movie that they were going to show. It's being premiered in Ankh-Morpork in the
Odium.
And Odium.
It's something like that, yeah.
And the Hollywood magic is quite powerful at this point. It's leaked out of but
Vetinari seems unaffected.
I don't know. I reckon.
Okay. He is affected when the screening happens. He's affected by that because everyone is. But he hasn't had any draw to this. It reminds me of a bit like a civic leader being asked to meet some like TikTok influencers. Are like, I don't know who these young people are. I've just been told to sit next to them and shake their hands, and that doesn't feel very, very Vetinari. He seems very dismissive of it, and I'm like,
I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks is it because the Hollywood kind of expects in these showings you to have the city dignitaries. it's kind of, it's not affecting them in the same way that it has affected Victor, but it's kind of having them playing a part.
I mean, saying that, I don't actually know if Vetinari's name is used, but everything else seems like him. It just seems very like...
Oh, no, it is Vetinari, because it was Vetinari in previous books, so it is definitely.
Oh, yeah. It just didn't seem like him to be a bit like, he only cared about people, not the technology. And it's like, but this is a whole thing that's been mad in the city, and he should know about it and be all on it, because that's what he does. But I wonder if this is where he learns, this is why I've got to keep up with this stuff, even though I'm personally not that interested in it as an art form, because it's a whole thing.
And it almost led to a 10-foot tall woman...
the attack of the 50-foot woman. She is 50 feet tall.
And, the entirety of the,
Well, the dungeon dimensions.
Yeah, it's almost unleashing a monster,
Because, again, it's this very early Discworld thing of the dungeon dimensions. So that what's the big bad? It's the dungeon dimensions. It's like, this thing again. Which,
well, I think
it's still a thing he's into, but it's just not such a thing in later books. So again, in my head, that's very early Discworld dungeon dimensions.
You think obviously this Holywood idea is them using it as a method of getting through, or even just hijacking. It's possible that Holywood.
Oh no, Holywood's its own thing, as Victor discovers when he investigates. But it is still a type of magic, and that attracts the dungeon dimension creatures. And then the fact is that the Holywood ritual was to keep something out, and then when the priest... Well, we should probably go into the backstory. So it kind of starts with an old priest dying in a ramshackle hut, as mentioned in the synopsis, and he realizes he hadn't trained anyone up. And basically what happened was, for as long as any of them can remember, and there's a book where they've written it in pictograms, the priest would go under the hill, the Holywood Hill, and... was it 3 times a day they'd recite the chants? And inside the Holy Hill is like a cinema. It's a cinema, and then when Dibbler gets one of the sort of picture houses to do themselves up, they kind of subconsciously recreate that.
Yes.
And Victor sort of starts looking into this, and he finds like the dead priest in the ramshackle hut, and he finds a book, and there's this sort of armed figure, this sort of guy with a sword, who looks a bit like somebody's Uncle Osric or Osberg or Oswald. Standing by a door, and they sort of think, that's the bad thing we need to keep out. And then him and, Gaspard finds out a lot of stuff, and no one listens to him, poor guy. Dog. Because Ginger keeps sleepwalking, and she keeps going under the hill without realising, and they think, oh gosh, she's trying to summon some terrors, because Victor, having had wizardly training, understands there's something a bit weird about this. He's still going along with it, but it's all a bit, weird and uncanny. There's this mystery thickens, and then it's interesting, actually, because Gaspard, who can't particularly read because he's a dog, although he's a very intelligent talking dog, but he looks at the picture and goes, what's with the dead guy? And he's like, what dead guy? And then he's looking at the pictures, and he just keeps seeing this figure sort of in front of the door, and they sort of think, that must be important. So even though Gaspard can't read, he's like, if something's being repeated all the time, it's important to the message. And it's only as they kind of follow, Gaspard discovers Ginger sleepwalking, Victor follows her, and they find that she's doing this thing in this weird space under the hill. And there's this big screen that's kind of like a void. It's like a portal into something, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so that's all a bit kind of creepy. But then the cavern ends up collapsing, and they think they've sorted it. But that's when the big film's happening in Ankh-Morpork. But we should probably talk about the big film.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's lots of things we could, let's talk about which aspects we enjoy.
Yeah.
Which So there is lots of film references in here.
Yeah.
Lots of film references. Mm-hmm. My particular favourite was the Blues Brothers reference towards the end.
Yes, with an elephant supplier. With 363 elephants at that point. They gather more elephants. That's enough of the plot lines. It's a bit like, when Dibbler starts making films, he ends up kicking out some of the alchemists because they just want to be educational. He wants to make these grand adventures and these... Because
to be fair, he knows what people want to watch.
It's basically the visual equivalent of a sausage in a bun. It's cheap, big, and it's impressive. And at one point somebody goes, how come all of Mr. Dibbler's films are always written in a world gone mad? And then his nephew, Sol, who seems to be kind of running a lot of it, goes, that's because Mr. Dibbler is a very observant man.
But yes, and throughout, it's always with 1,000 elephants.
But then the 1,000 elephants is just like a few camels that they've made run past the screen, past the camera multiple times.
But yes, so I personally, love the Blues Brothers reference, and any chance of a Blues Brothers reference is always good. So, what was your favourite film reference?
I think I like it's kind of the thing in Ginger's dream, because this thing when Ginger goes for her nighttime walks without quite realising. She has a dream of a mountain with a load of stars flying over it. Then one of the stars flies closer and it turns out it's a woman holding a torch. And then she can hear a lion roaring, and I'm just like, well, that's Paramount and Columbia and MGM. And then also the fact you've got the studio names. So, you've got
Century of the Fruit Bat.
Century of the Fruit Bat for 20th Century Fox, Untied Alchemists for United Artists, Paramountain. And then also, I think it's Birchwood Studios. They definitely put one of the studios in. I'm like, oh, that's like Pinewood here. I quite like, the talking animals, like the cat and mouse, Tom and Jerry, and the rabbit wants to be the tough guy, although he's not as much like Bugs Bunny as you'd think.
No.
And then I quite like the mythicness of it.
Yeah.
So one of the things they kind of gradually uncover is that there used to be a city where Hollywood is, it went to the sea. So it's this very much, it's kind of a mixture of Atlantis and kind of Sodom and Gomorrah. You've got a city, something went badly wrong, it sunk beneath the sea. So that's quite a mythic thing. And then I quite like the bit where he says, a few survivors bring arts and crafts to civilization, which is very Atlantis. But what Pratchett chooses is such as usury and macrame. It's like, okay. And then it reveals that a lot of the people who are susceptible to the Hollywood magic are ones who are probably descendants of the people from that city, and that Ginger herself is probably the descendant of a high priestess there. But yes, I just quite like all the Gone with the Wind stuff, because what happens is after being there a bit, Dibbler wakes in the night and feverishly writes basically Gone with the Wind on his bed.
With 1,000 elephants.
With 1,000 elephants. But weirdly, after having written it in this sort of state and saying we're going to make this, I think it's 7 reels long or something, he is then constantly trying to stuff it full of advertising, mostly for Harger's House of Ribs. Whereas his nephew Sol seems to be who he brought in to replace the various people who kicked out.
He brought in a lot of his nephews. He does seem to have a lot of nephews.
I thought it was just Sol. It's just Sol.
It did mention more nephews, just not by name.
Yeah, Sol's the only one that's named. Sol's kind of his right-hand man, but Sol's the one who suddenly seems to take over the artistic vision of him and is constantly going and stopping his uncle from putting in... Because he learns about subliminal messaging and... that kind of stuff. But what I like is the way they say it works. So they make a set of Ankh-Morpork, and someone's like, couldn't we just go to Ankh-Morpork and film? No, we made a set of it. And the set is more realistic than the actual city.
Yes.
And it's just the idea that it's a distillation of it. It looks more real than the real thing. It's also an interesting callback to Colour of Magic, because part of the thing involves the city burning, so they burn the set. Yeah. And obviously we know that Ankh-Morpork has been burnt various times for many reasons, including insurance fraud.
Accidental insurance fraud that caused the city to burn accidentally. I think he was only looking into burning his place down.
Yes, but the fire was still started about insurance fraud, which was, happened shortly after the concept of insurance was invented. See Colour of Magic. I just like that, and the idea that it's kind of more real to people than what it's depicting.
I mean, there's lots of that.
And there's it's that whole showbiz entertainment thing, and it just made me think about. Obviously, it's kind of the opposite way around now. But if you look at, for example, in Star Trek when they have the holodecks, that is real sets depicting a fake environment. But now what we have is fake environments instead of real sets. So it's like, just walk across this green screen and it's like, it'll look like whatever it is we want. It's like we've kind of gone the other way. But I kind of like that. And the fact that you've got all these sets, there's just like a single chipboard's thickness between, the pyramids and... Although, interestingly, I noticed that whenever they mention pyramids, they only mention Sort. No one mentions Jelly Baby.
Yes.
Did it just disappear from everyone's minds?
Possibly, yes.
I mean, clearly Pratchett didn't go back to it. Maybe it was just because they only mentioned the pyramids of Sort. But because you've got various people trying to make historical epics and things. So a canvas thickness away is then like the streets of Ankh-Morpork or, all these different places. And I think I just kind of like the vibe of the whole thing. Like, this is all made up, but we're all really committed to making this illusion
the best it can be.
Yes, while everything behind the scenes is everyone's eating terrible food, and then nothing seems very stable. Everything's very changeable, because for a while Victor makes one click, then he gets chucked out, and he's tries to get money holding horses, and there's a guy who's a veteran horse holder, which means he's just been there a couple of months, because this has all happened so quickly. It's been a few months. You've got this whole increasing town coming up, and Victor can't even do that, and then suddenly he's very popular, so they're get him back, because I assume Victor's supposed to be quite dishy, and
as I say, Errol Flynn.
Yeah, and Ginger's Ginger's quite unpleasant and combative, but again, I think a lot of the great leading ladies of the age of cinema it's about were a little like that. But also her whole thing is just that she's kind of also a bit scantily clad and is good at swooning. But there's points where they get taken over by the Hollywood. It's so hard to say Hollywood instead of Hollywood. Yeah. Every time the Hollywood magic, and they do these very smouldering scenes, but in reality, Victor sort of seems interested in Ginger. Ginger's not really here for that. And I quite like there's the bit where she says, she's so taken with it, and she says, just think of all the people in history who weren't able to do what they were good at. You know, like, she's good at this. She also says she wants to be, you know, the most famous person.
Yeah.
And Victor's like, for what? She's like, no, that's not it. But just the idea of all these people in history who never found out what they were good at because it didn't exist yet. You know, because obviously for them, Hollywood's so new. But it is a good wider point, although he perhaps doesn't go into very much, you know, that all the people who don't have the opportunity to get good at the thing they'd be super talented at because of...
stupidity.
Well, no, not stupidity, just that they live in societies who don't allow them. It's like the Mozart to Kalahari type thing. It's like, you know, unless you have the opportunity to try a load of instruments and try all these different art forms, how are you ever going to find out what you're good at? But so many people for history, no opportunity. So, yeah. It's just kind of, it's almost a side point, but I just quite like that.
I do enjoy as well the end pastiche on King Kong.
Yes. Well, shall we mention the librarian and how he's involved first?
Of course, the librarian is because
it's a bit like Guards in that way. It's like the librarian is also here and is going to get a bit more involved in the plot.
Well, the librarian is obviously taken by the flicks.
Clicks.
It's
okay. So it's based off the word flicks, which was the old word for films. Or movies.
It's just
it's quite interesting. I was talking when I worked in libraries, so this has got to be something in the region of 15 or so years ago, or about that. I was talking to a colleague who was some years older than me, and he said something about using the word flicks to a teenager at the time to mean films, and the lad didn't know what he meant. I feel like I'm quite good at like older terms for things just because the kind of stuff I used to watch and read and stuff. But yeah, flicks is a bit of an old-fashioned term for films. I'm not even sure where that comes from, and it might just be a British thing.
Possibly.
But then, yeah, they call them clicks, but it's because of the clicky noise of the projector.
Anyway, so the librarian is a huge fan of the clicks. He goes and watches multiple showings of the same film, mostly because no one is willing to go and ask him to leave. Which is fair enough. But he also notices that there's something odd because he notices the Holy Wood hill. Because obviously he is a very, very well-read orangutan. And this is also where we briefly run into the Telenecronomicon.
Yeah, because the librarian, he watches the film a lot of times, and he goes and he takes a bite out of some film. Like, he goes into the projector booth.
Yes, and basically edits it out.
He just takes a bite, and then when the picture house owner looks at it, it was just a flash of some rocks between some camels going past.
Yeah.
But I think the rocks have writing on them or something.
Yes, I think he recognised something. Yeah. So he goes into the depths of the library
to investigate,
to find to the books that are completely off limits to everyone, that need to be in special housing, which is to the Telenecronomicon, which is obviously Pratchett's version of the Necronomicon. And this is where he kind of puts two and two together, starts realising that it's something bad's going to end up happening.
Or something like this happened before.
He's got an idea.
But it's not till the end. Again, a lot of stuff kind of comes together at the end. Yeah. That at least seems more plot relevant than just the wizards ignoring the elephant plot.
Yeah. Because that deals with reality. That's yeah. So yes, towards the end, they're all at this showing where the cinema versions of Victor and Ginger.
Yeah, so what happens is, well, there's the fog, isn't there? There's the boding fog.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
we didn't mention Laddie as well.
True, there is Laddie. So Laddie is...
They think there should be a dog in the film, and Victor's always got a dog with him, but that dog isn't very photogenic, so they get this incredibly photogenic dog called Laddie, and we can tell what he's saying because obviously Gaspard speaks both dog and human.
Yeah.
And Laddie was like, "Good boy, Laddie."
Laddie is he's as thick as two short planks. He's
They don't need him to be smart.
No. He's very well trained. He does exactly what he's told, mainly because he's a good boy.
Good boy, Laddie.
Yeah.
And then poor Gaspard is there being massively upstaged by this very dim, but I mean, he's the himbo of dogs, basically. Yes. And Gaspard kind of wants to despise him because he's just very keen on human attention. And Gaspard's like, we don't need it. But then Gaspard can also use Laddie to get like a load of meat. Like he
basically uses him as a way of getting drinks and food because basically takes Laddie into various places, and Laddie just sits there and looks at people, sticks his head on their lap.
Oh, a nice dog.
And some food, yeah.
Whereas Gaspard gets kicks, which again annoys him.
Gaspard is also his agent.
He is also his agent, that's true. He does help him negotiate.
Did negotiate. So we have Right, so Laddie's around. Laddie's
Yes.
you know.
Yeah. So they're doing the big... What's the film called? The clique called?
Oh, The Burning Passion.
Something like that.
Spelled really badly.
Yeah, that's the other thing. All of Dibbler's very lurid and exciting descriptions of films are all very badly spelled, but Pratchett does that. He has a lot of people who are literate but can't spell, and I don't think they have standardised spelling yet, which, considering we know they haven't invented the printing press yet, kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But yes, everything's very kind of, it's spelt in a kind of oldie world way, or like kind of odd bits of phonetic, which obviously doesn't work with English because it's a silly language. But yes, I just wrote like Gone with the Wind. I mean, basically, you've got Ginger's playing this woman who's trying to, protect the old family mine. Oh, and then because a lot of the dwarf actors go, you don't have a mine, Ankh-Morpork.
Oh, it's blown away.
That's it, because it's Gone with the Wind. Yes, it's called Blown Away. That's the joke. There's just so many jokes in this. It's hard to keep track of them all. So, yeah, Ginger's playing this character who... Although they don't call her Ginger, she's called, was it Dolores de la Sin or something?
Yeah,
is what...
Dolores de Sign or something.
I think it's supposed to be Sin, but he spelt it badly.
Yeah.
Whereas Victor's still Victor, so, Dibble just changes her name. Ginger's character is looking after the old family mine, because that's when the dwarf actors say, you can't have a mine, Ankh-Morpork, it's on loam, which they always mention. I was like, this is the first time they mention the loam.
No, it's not, because they mention it in Guards, because the rock, they pull the rock out to tie Sybil onto, and they comment, they don't know where they got that from, because
it's but I'm like, I'm not even sure I know what loam is. I thought it's the main place I ever hear about it.
It's not very rocky. It's not good for mines.
Okay. My geology GCSE is doing no help here whatsoever, but yes, it's okay. I hadn't obviously quite noticed that.
I mean, we need the dwarves so we can have the musical number of Hi Ho.
Yes, because then later they make reference to the Hi Ho song, don't they? But yes, basically, but it's this big deal. So the patrician, as we mentioned, gets invited along. Dibbler gets the Picture House to have the premiere. It's the first premiere they've had, because normally I think the cliques are just taken to Ankh-Morpork and they're shown, and the money gets raked in. Because that's the other thing. Dibbler's constantly cutting corners, saying, "Oh, I don't have any money," and then bags of cash are just appearing.
Yeah.
And Victor and Ginger think they've defeated what happened, because they went under the hill and they saw the auditorium with the weird screen to nothing and the big gold statue that looked like somebody's Uncle Osbert or Osric. And there was a plinth, I think, as well. But it caved in. Some trolls dug them out. Oh, good, it stopped. And then there's this fog. It's this boding fog, as Gaspo calls it. But they go to Ankh-Morpork. There's this big premiere. The patrician's there. He doesn't know who they are. They're sitting with him. They've never actually seen a clique since they both first started, because they've just been in them all the time. Which I think is a bit like, you hear actors sometimes, they go on press junkets, but they've not seen the film until the premiere because they were just in various bits of it.
I was watching some West Wing clips. I saw an interview with Martin Sheen, who said there's a number of West Wing episodes he hasn't actually seen. He actually hasn't seen the episode with the Butterball Hotline bit in it, which is hysterical. But
but he was in the scene.
He was in the scene, but he hasn't seen the finished article.
Oh, that's fair.
But anyway,
what happens is they start playing the click, and then everyone basically gets mesmerised by it, and the only person that isn't seems to be Gaspo. Now, Gaspo's quite good at waking people up, because he just does this thing where he's this horrible little dog with a cold, wet nose, and he puts his nose against your leg, because that's how he wakes Ginger when she's in, and they think she's summoning something. But what happens is that the screen becomes a portal, and then a giant flickering, because it flickers a bit, because it's like this old film stuff, version of Ginger climbs out of the screen, and then we get the attack of the 50-foot woman. Yeah, so it's all a bit kind of horrifying, because the point is the Dungeon Dimension things are very shapeless, they don't have proper form. In fact, I think there's a bit later where one returns to its regular form, it's described as looking like an explosion in an aquarium.
Yes,
but because Victor and Ginger are such a focus of people's attention and desire as well, sometimes put a little bit more crudely than others, thank you, wizard geezers.
Yes.
And admiration stuff, that they're these big focuses, and then basically the Victor has to use the film, which is highly combustible, to stop, because then a big version of him is trying to climb out the screen, and everyone's mesmerised. Then they wake people up and get them out, and the librarian's helping, isn't he? And then Victor uses the film to stop it, but what happens is somebody has to take the fire in, because it's that flammable. So then the dogs agree to do it. They're going to save the day. So Gaspo and Laddie go into the Odium. Laddie goes to pull Gaspo out, but then they don't exit. But when the Picture House explodes, there's a big draft, and then the giant Ginger does the Marilyn Monroe thing with the air vent and the skirt. And again, he describes it, he never says Marilyn Monroe, but you're like,
knows.
that's clearly what's happening.
Everyone knows. So yes, he's basically playing on the whole King Kong, So of course, if you've got a giant 50-foot woman, then you need a monkey to be grabbed, and poor an ape. So the librarian is there attempting to attack the.
The librarian tries to be Tarzan, but ends up as Fay Ray in a reverse King Kong. It's interesting because just before that, Victor races out, and the crowd don't quite realise it's not
part of
it's real, because they've all seen Victor save the day multiple times. So they say to him, "Oh yeah, you can save the day," and he's just like, "What?" And no one does anything because they think he's going to save the day. Because they've seen him do it so many times in clicks. And then Ginger actually says to him, it's like, this thing is bigger than both of us. Because it is. And then Victor says the magic's where you find it. And then he harnesses Hollywood magic. So he gets Gaffer, the camera guy, to start filming, or he's pretending to. And then he creates a horse and a sword out of, again, they look like they're on film. And he harnesses this magic to do all this stuff. So you're right, the big thing is heading to the library, because where is the most magic in Ankh-Morpork?
It's in the library. Well, It's always in the library. The most magic is always in the library.
Yeah, but the point is the dungeon, because that's the thing, the wizards can't help. Some people say, the wizards, why don't you help? And if we use magic, it'll just make it stronger. Yeah. The librarian, beats his chest, does the cry, swings down, and then gets grabbed, and reverse King Kong.
And so you got this 50-foot woman with holding an ape, climbing the Tower of Art, with the Bursar and the Arch-Chancellor on a dodgy broomstick, with the Arch-Chancellor with a crossbow, doing the entire buzzing around like a...
Well, he also says if it bleeds, we can kill it.
Yes, which is fair.
And then eventually she does fall, doesn't she?
Yes.
And then which wizard is it? Oh, the Dean says the famous was Beauty killed the Beast line at the end, but the chair immediately goes, no, it's because she fell. Which I love, because I do feel like the 'twas Beauty killed the Beast thing at the end of King Kong is slightly victim blamey, frankly. Yes. Fairy didn't ask for that.
No.
Well, the character whose name I forget. But yes.
So that's all good fun. I think that what we there is a lot of fun in this book.
There is, yes. And it's just it's fun and it's references, but I think if you don't get the references, it's still fine.
Yeah, I think there's if you know, the more you know about classic films, the more you're going to get out of it. But there's still going to be jokes and things you're going to get.
And even if you don't necessarily get immediately or even at all why there's a giant woman carrying a regular sized ape up a big building,
it's still funny.
It's still this is such a fun mental image, So yeah, that was good. And then they sort of think it's over because they destroy it in Ankh-Morpork, but then they're like, we have to go back to Hollywood. Because Hollywood, which is normally full of activity, is entirely silent, and they get into the town and there's no sound, and it's like that episode of Buffy.
Yes.
And the reason there's no sound but there is colour is because they figured out colour but they never figured out sound. So everyone's having to write down or sign what they're doing. And the librarian's got... Does he have Necro Telecomicon?
No, he's no.
But he's sort of shown him because Victor has that book he found with the old priest with all the pictograms. And then the librarian shows him, I'm not quite sure this is a reference to, that goes the other way because Victor's been reading it left to right. But if you look right to left, the sort of figure that looks like a dead man or a guy with a sword, who looks like everyone's uncle, if you look, there's always a portal next to him. But if you look at it, it's not this coming out of the portal, it's that he's guarding the portal. If you read it the opposite way around, he's a guard. And then they realise, well, where's everyone gone? And there's all the boding mist. And then they go under the hill. And as happened at Ankh-Morpork, the entirety of the population of Hollywood is under there. And again, completely enthralled to this screen. And this was the original screen that's a portal to somewhere. And the whole town's in this pit. And the wizards have come along because obviously Victor's managed to harness the Hollywood magic to manifest a horse and a sword and try and save the day, but only works while he's being filmed.
Yeah.
So the wizards in the wheelchair Windlepoons, who's this... got this, it's kind of like a battle chariot. But
it's a battle chariot, pretty much, yes.
Are sort of riding along and going really fast, and they're using some magic to get along, but Victor's using Hollywood magic because him and Ginger can. And basically, Ginger's reluctant to look at any of this because she kind of doesn't want to be involved because she thought she was summoning something horrible and they stopped her. But it turns out when the librarian shows her, they reckon she's a descendant of the priestess in the Sunken City. And there's a bit in the cavern under the hill where you can go into the sea. Yeah. And Victor died down once, and you could see there was a city there. They reckon, she must be a priestess. That's why, because she's had that dream, the dream with all the clips from the start of the film, since she was a kid. This is the thing, it's always been with her. And everyone's enthralled to it, and stuff's trying to get through the screen. So what they do is they throw a gong, the big classic, gong, breaks the silence. like in that Buffy app when she screams.
Yeah.
So, and then everyone escapes except Victor and Ginger because they're like, they have to be the final ones. Because it wakes up the gold statue. So there's a big gold statue, which is on the original cover. It's kind of on the front. But it's basically the Oscar statue, you know. But in this, because he's got a sword, he attacks the things that are coming through the screen. So when they come through, it actually protects them. And the thought is that actually what the priests were doing was they weren't summoning something, Ginger wasn't summoning something, they were trying to keep something in by, you know, remembering it and passing it down.
Yeah.
And then there's various epilogues. It's a little bit like Lord of the Rings that way.
It's just the Hollywood magic disappearing. So you've got lots of just references. So the dwarves singing "Hi Ho" in a mine.
I mean, you've got so Victor and Ginger aren't sure what to do next. They've had this strange shared experience, but they decide between they need to remember Hollywood because they're the only ones that kind of know what's happened. The dogs nearly die. They nearly die in the collapsing cinema, but then Death turns up. And Gaspo specifically asks if there's a death of dogs, and Death says no. Also, I feel like Death was a bit not nice to them because he's more of a cat person, but that doesn't seem very fair. But basically, the dogs didn't come out, and everyone's like, oh no, and they try to save them. Laddie gets, you know, rescued. And everyone's like, oh yay, Laddie's there. It's a miracle. Because that's the other thing, the dog lives in the end. And then poor Gasper just has to like drag himself out of the rubble after everyone's gone. Poor thing. The other animals start losing their smarts, so they start going back themselves. Except, because the duck only ever says quack, we can't understand what the duck's saying. But does the duck turn up later on somebody's head, is my thinking. Is it that duck?
It might be that duck.
This is now my headcanon. That's where that duck's from.
Like, it is a head duck as well, so...
Yeah, so... Oh, so Detritus, in his romance with Ruby, because Ruby was talking to a lot of human women and finding out about human mating rituals, and so she was asking Detritus to bring her vegetation, by which she kind of meant flowers, but they only have one word for vegetation in Trollish. So he brings her a tree, and she's trying to, and he's a bit confused because normally you just whack each other over the head, and that's kind of troll courtship, and she's trying to complicate things, but then Detritus clearly really likes her, and they're eating somewhere together, and suddenly there's a moment, and it almost turns into a big splashy musical. And I think, does he say play it again, Sam, or something? And it almost becomes that, and he starts singing There May Be Trouble Ahead. But then it suddenly subsides, and that doesn't fully happen, because, as you say, the Hollywood magic's ebbing away. But at least things like there's a happy ending for Detritus and Ruby, and also things are a bit more trollish now, and he feels a bit more like he understands it. And then the last thing is, so these elephants, which were ordered a while ago, and this guy and his nephew, no, not his nephew, his like assistant keeper, travelling across Clatch and across some mountains, so there's a bit of Hannibal there, to deliver these elephants to a Mr. Dibbler at Hollywood. And then and it keeps jumping to it, and there's the Blues Brothers reference and there's bits, but you keep thinking, where's this going to build up to? And then basically they arrive in Ankh-Morpork after it's happened. And they say, we're supposed to take these to Hollywood, and I think it's Nob and Cola on the gate, and they're a bit like, that's not there anymore. Like, so we need to give these to Mr. Dibbler, and Nob is a bit like, please, Sarge, please let me tell him. Because Dibbler's 1,000 elephants have arrived.
Yes.
And I kept waiting for the payoff on that. I think it was just that. So
it was pretty much
that. So that felt a little bit odd, but yeah. And that's kind of it. It feels like, obviously, early Discworld has a lot of, like, riffing on things, and again, you've got, you know, pyramids obviously doing like ancient Egypt, mostly a bit of ancient Greece, and you've got, I mean, obviously Colour Magic was specifically parodies of various, you know, fantasy books of the time, and this feels like the first time he takes him from the modern world and is a bit like, here's this thing, and we're going to make this like a fad in Ankh-Morpork, and I feel a bit, or you know, like this big thing that's come to the disc, and the ideas coming from outside. There's been bits of that with like, you know, certain characters like Worlde being like the Shakespeare bard character, and but also having a lot of film references as well in that. So, you know, there's some bits is where the whole thing takes everything over, which again I feel like is a soul music thing. Soul music obviously falls into a specific sub-series as well, and then obviously kind of going postal, making money, or a bit like that, but with institutions. So a lot of the Moist on Litvig books of that. But this feels like the first one. It's a bit like, I'm going to like parody this whole thing.
I'm going to do early cinema on the Discworld. Which I think he does well. As I say, it's fun. It's fun, it's a lot. You know, you can get the reference.
Very gag filled.
It's has a beginning, middle, and an end. It has a good payoff at the end. You know.
Yes, which because sometimes some of his earlier endings
we have you know. So, but you know, I think we're well onto the.
We don't see Victor and Ginger again. We're not even sure if they're together, but they sort of talk about them. I know that they have to remember it, and they think maybe remembering it is what will keep the magic at bay, rather than the priests doing all the chanting. Like, maybe we just have to remember Hollywood. Yeah, it's just again, it's one of those things that Ankh-Morpork's gone crazy for this thing now. And
Yeah, but I think it works within kind of the Ankh-Morpork sort of setting, insofar as I think there has been loads of these things that come up and then die off very quickly. This is just another of those that the city kind of will just go back to normal, or absorb some of it. But
obviously it's the starting point of the wizard faculty.
Yeah.
It really flashes out Dibbler. It's where Gaspo comes from. So those are all characters and things that will continue.
Well, to try to get a bit more of a who will become important later on for the Guard series,
and also soul music.
So I mean, it is, unlike Pyramids, it does actually
it feels part of the thing, part of the world more.
Yes, while we don't necessarily get references back to it, it does feel like it's actually
it's set into things, isn't it? Whereas Pyramids feels even more like I'd say this one is a standalone, but it's the starting point for a lot of stuff. So I think it wouldn't be the worst starting point if somebody was quite into film. You'd be like, oh, this is quite funny if you want that parodied. Whereas again, Pyramids, nothing in that. I mean, the fact that they mentioned the Pyramids of Swords, not even Jelly Baby, it's like Jelly Baby's still in that rock.
I think it's just not as big a deal as So historically, it's just the place with the pyramids rather than the sword, which has got a more of a...
No, but the point is, sword. The pyramids don't get mentioned, Jelly Baby, it's just the sword.
Yeah, but the point is that sword has got a bit richer history behind it.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas Jelly Baby is just all about the pyramids.
Well, they all went, but it's.
I mean, there's loads of little bits in here to say. I'm sure we've missed numerous references.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
But yes.
Obviously, like Lad is Lassie. And...
I just realised... So Ridkley, there's a Tolkien reference there.
Oh, okay.
Because he's Ridkley the Brown.
Oh, yes, because he always calls him that the whole way through, doesn't he?
Yes, because the idea is that they're expecting more of a Radagast type person of, likes walks amongst trees, and instead they get this kind of less...
bluff, outdoorsman.
Slightly different version of her.
Mrs. Cosmopolite is also, she's the wardrobe lady, isn't she?
Yes.
And then she's mentioned later. It just brings up a lot of stuff that then he kind of takes off in different ways later.
I think we are definitely thumbs up for this one.
Absolutely.
I think perhaps we enjoyed it more than we might have expected.
Yeah.
And I think we certainly enjoyed it more than we did Eric.
For sure, yeah.
Which was, obviously our last one previous to this. So yes, definitely read Moving Pictures. Next up, well, we're going to do a bit of a recap. We are now effectively a quarter of the way through the series.
Yeah.
There's 42-ish plus some
41.
There's some short stories in there as well, but that we'll most likely do at the end.
We'll see how we go.
And I kind of feel like we're at a good point to then reflect upon.
Yes, this is kind of like the first quarter of the early Discworld.
So next episode we'll be having a bit of a chat about what we've thought about the last quarter, what we've enjoyed, what we've
like themes or stuff.
Yeah, just generally, So please join us next time in a world gone mad. 2 people sitting round their dining table
with 1,000 small plastic dinosaurs.
That's actually quite accurate.
That is
1,000 plastic dinosaurs. Good night, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Dining Table Discworld. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Dining Table Discworld. You can also find us on BlueSky at dtdiscworld. All our other contact information and credits for our music can be found in our show notes. Thank you for listening again, and we'll see you in our next episode.